Good morning. Lovely to be in your presence, and special welcome to everyone worshiping online. If you see me looking at the camera, it's because there's more of you out there than in here today, which is very good. I'm glad that we all used our discretion and were careful in getting here, and those who needed to stay home did. I'm Reverend Beth Hayward, one of the ministers here, and it's good. It's good to come together and worship. And I'm not going to make you all move to the front, but I will say, when there's small numbers, it is kind of nice and cozy to be closer together. So if you feel inclined at any point, like maybe in the opening hymn, to come forward, it would make me really happy. Last night, we had a beautiful concert here that you're going to hear more about in a little while. And the implication of that is that some of us are a little tired, maybe some more tired than others. And perhaps the most beautiful part of having this space so fully used on a Saturday night is we don't know where half the stuff is anymore. We're like finding candles and all sorts of things. And it actually helps us lean into that place of you can go from a beautiful celebration of music and into a moment of what feels like chaos, and all of it is part of our lives. And what a gift to have some chaos and some music and community and live streaming. However you come this day, whoever you are, whatever space you're in, you are welcome here. We are worshiping on the same lands that we play and work on, the lands of the Mi'kmaq people. And I know that that often lands as just one of those things you need to say. Let's remember that if you don't know where to start with the story and the work of reconciliation, we do have the actions from the TRC that you can meditate on one of those as part of your prayer practice every single week, and just open your heart to what is it that led us to need to have these calls to action. So in this time of worship, we start by lighting the candle. Natalie's going to come forward and help me with this. Katie found the candle, so Katie's going to, well, you can't, that microphone's not plugged in today. So Natalie, you do the lighting. Good.
Go ahead. God is here.
All the time.
All the time.
God is here.
All are welcome.
All the time.
All the time.
All are welcome. You are welcome here. Let's stand and maybe mingle and maybe move forward and sing together.
Good morning. Good morning, you amazing Canadian weather busters. I love it. I need some help up here this morning, so a couple of you who are kids at heart, you can come join us too. Be brave. Yes, we have brave people. Yes. I'm going to sit right between the two of you. Want to sit by Dad? Excellent. All right. So I am Natalie Moyes. I'm the interim family ministry lead here as I fill in for the lovely and talented Paige Fraser. And my pronouns are she, her. And I would like to introduce you to my friend. This is Bopper. See Bopper? This is Bopper. Are you going to hold the mic for me? Yeah. You think I can't blow up balloons and talk at the same time?
And hold the mic down.
Okay.
There's power in truth. Okay. The truth is, no, I don't think you can blow up a balloon, talk, and hold the mic at the same time.
All right. So, Bopper's looking a little deflated today. You think? A little sad? So, Bopper, why are you so sad? I'm not making Bopper's noises. Oh, Bopper made a really tall tower out of blocks, and nobody saw it. Yeah. What would we say to Bopper to make Bopper feel a little better? What would you think? Oh, Bopper. They think it might have been a cool tower. What could we say to Bopper to make them feel a little better?
Great job, Bopper.
Great job, Bopper. Ooh, Bopper. Looking a little more like you usually look. Although it looks like that your eye is a little faint. It's been in my pocket too long this morning. Oh. Really, Bopper? You aren't sure that you're not sure that it was a good tower? Oh. Well, you know what? I think it was an amazing tower. You know how I know it was an amazing tower? Because you don't have hands. How amazing would it be to build a tower without hands? Oh, Bopper's feeling better. Bopper's starting to look more like Bopper's self. Oh, yeah, definitely was a great tower. Really? The best tower ever? You are the best tower builder the world has ever seen? Oh. No way. You were also the best construction person ever of everything? Even like bridges? But Bopper, are you sure? No, really? Bopper says that Bopper is so good that some of those other kids that they play with might have to take lessons from them. What? And you might not let them help you? Bopper? Oh my goodness. Bopper? I'm a little worried about you, Bopper. Is anybody else a little worried about Bopper? Look over there. There's someone with their fingers in their ears. Bopper, it's not so good for you to have a head this inflated. And I'm not sure that the people around you are, well, they look anxious. Do you want your friends to be anxious? What can we do to help Bopper, like, come back to normal?
Anyone? You have an idea, Natalie?
Bopper, you know what? I think that you made a beautiful tower. I think that I love you just the way you are, whether or not you make towers. I think that your friends kind of like it when you're a little smaller so they can see past you and see the other friends. I didn't practice that part. How good's that? I'm glad you got the mic. Popper, I'm glad that your pride has settled out a little bit. Oh, there we go. That looks like a normal bopper. So, guys, do you see what happened? You know, sometimes we need some really good, encouraging words when we're sad. And it's really nice when somebody says they're proud of us. But sometimes we hang on to that too hard and we become so proud that it separates us from our friends. And you know what? God doesn't want us separated from our friends. I wonder if you have ever had a moment when you were so big on something that was so important to you, that other people went, I think you're a little much right now. I think Bopper is very happy to know that they are enough. How about we say a prayer for Bopper and for us? Are you got it, Bopper? Yeah, I love Bopper's very happy. Dear God, help us remember that pride can be a lovely thing until it goes too far. Help me learn humility. And help me remember to always be kind. Amen. Oh, I have a question. Who here knows what the word humility means? Because I used it in the prayer. Anybody know what humility means? Nobody knows what humility means? My version of humility is that you recognize that we need all of us together and you can't do stuff all on your own. Is that a good definition? All right. Let's see. Oh, good. We found the lantern. It was where it was. Harrison, would you like to carry the lantern to Sunday school today? Yes. Okay, up you go. I got a very solid yes. Yeah, sorry I didn't ask you, Bopper, but you don't have any hands. Or helium. There once was a person who said such amazing things and did such amazing things and incredible things. And people said, who are you? One time when he answered, he said, I am the light. Do you suppose he said it in a voice that deep? No. All right. So we have a few people. Let's go off to Sunday school. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the world around us.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Oh, it's offering time. Oh, where are the plates? Here they are. Look at that. Thank you, Kathy and Jean. While we take up the offering, I have a few announcements. Last night, as Reverend Hi, I'm Reverend Katie. For those of you who may not know me, my pronouns are she, her. I am one of the ministers here at Bedford United Church, and I'm just extra jazzed this morning because last night we had this really amazing evening of incredibly delicious food and men in bow ties everywhere you looked, and a silent auction where there was something for everyone, and then this amazing concert with the incredibly talented Garrett Mason, who was warm and personable and came out with 4 guitars and played them all. And last night happened because of the men at this church. So the most important announcement is thank you to the men's group who made some incredible things happen. And I'm going to say it, many women I have talked to have just been like, wow. I'm going to start asking for more at home. Next Sunday after worship, we are hosting the Newcomers After Party. If you feel like you're a newcomer here or you want to meet some folks that are new here, come hang out after worship for some food and some conversation, some get to know you, learn a little bit more about who we are at Bedford United, and we'd like to learn more about who you are. Also after worship, also next Sunday, we're going to have communion. We decided to postpone it for a week because of the weather, and a lot of people who were here last night just, you know what, they slept in, and that's great. February 20th, the third February of the month, is church in the afternoon. This is a half-hour service. It's a short traditional service with a 20-minute period ahead of that, which is just an organ meditation. You're welcome to come to the sanctuary ahead of time for some quiet time here. That's at 2 p.m. February 23rd is our February community meal. We are looking for folks to pitch in. And we also have a speaker series that happens after the community meal. So please linger afterwards for that. And I will invite our ushers to come up. So Reverend Beth has a really wonderful sermon today about many things, including gratitude and scarcity, and how the way we think of what we have and what we don't have impacts the way that we live. And so as I see these gifts here, and I think of all of the ways in which this community participates in the act of being community, that in a time of deep division, we have the wisdom to come together as community. I give great thanks that everything God has entrusted to us in our health, in our money, in our gifts, in our skills, that everything that comes to this community would be used to bring God's love and God's commonwealth into being. Amen. So our reading today comes from the prophet Jeremiah. He was a Jewish prophet. He had a tough life. I think we talked about that a little bit last week. Yeah, it was hard times for Jeremiah. And God called Jeremiah when he was still in utero. And Jeremiah was like, I hear you, but I'm not quite ready yet. Give me a minute. So when he was born, he lived in a time of great transition, and he became a prophet. He started his prophecy during the time of some prominence for Israel, and he lived in the shadow of the temple in Jerusalem. But by the time his life as a prophet ended, his people were in exile. And he had spent his life and his prophetic journey telling the people of Israel, you need to change your ways. And if you don't, bad things are going to happen. And so, sure enough, the temple was destroyed, the people were exiled, and he fled to Egypt. So today's reading is from that period when he lived in exile, and he's demanding of his people this question: how will we live in this new and less hospitable normal? How do we live as an exiled people? The options that he gives are pretty black and white, and they're a little scary, and I think that might be on purpose. So here is a reading from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, verses 5 through 10. Before I read this, let's remember the angels who say, "Be not afraid." God says, "Cursed are those who trust in human ways, who make mere flesh their strength, whose hearts turn away from God. They are like stunted vegetation in the desert, with no hope in the future. It stands in stony wastes in the desert, an uninhabited land of salt. But blessed are those who put their trust in God, with God for their hope. They are like a tree planted by the river that thrusts its roots towards the stream. When the heat comes, it feels no heat. Its leaves stay green, and it is untroubled in a year of drought and never ceases to bear fruit. The human heart is more unwise than anything else and desperately backwards. Who can understand it? I, Yahweh, search into the heart to give all according to their ways, according to the fruit of their doings. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God.
So last week, I suggested that we need to root ourselves in news stories, that maybe the story we've all been raised in and lived and breathed isn't showing its cracks and isn't serving us as well as maybe we thought it was. And we're noticing that the earth is hurting and people are left behind and we need a new story. And so I suggested that one story in this place we could lean into is the idea that God is actually active and alive and at work, right? There is this presence, tangible, real presence of love at work in the world. And then I got thinking, all right, let's look at what gets in the way of that. So the first thing I come up with is humility, which is interesting, because I'm playing with that, and I'm thinking, well, is it really humility that we need? But I did run with it a bit, and I like my sermon title, "Oh Lord, It's Hard to Be Humble." Does anyone else know that song? So my father would sing that song to me as a child. "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble." Listen to it, I won't do it justice. "When you're perfect in every way, I can't wait to look in the mirror, because I get better looking each day. To know me is to love me, I must be one hell of a gal. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble, but I'm doing the best that I can." So part of it is, I never pass a mirror without looking in it. And you could think it's because I just want to see such beauty. But anyone who does that knows that half the reason you're looking in the mirror is to make sure that what you're presenting to the world, that you think it's okay for the world to see, right? So So I hope that my father knew that, I mean, he thought I was a feisty, difficult child who was full of herself. But I do hope that he and others can see that in truth, there's other aspects to all of us. And sometimes what comes off as I've got this together has its shadow side, this part that we think we have to overcome of not good enough, not pretty enough, not rich enough. And what I wonder is, in fact, it's not really that we need a humility in the traditional sense, but we need to just get better at integrating, at saying the complexity of who we are makes us who we are. And there are some things, sure, we need to overcome, but you know, that whole thing of I'm worried what people will think of me, it's just kind of part of me, and it's right there. And the more I own it and love it, the more I'm able to kind of show up and be, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay if a little bit geeky and sometimes speak too loud, and it's just part of me. So I don't know if it's humility so much that we need, but authenticity perhaps. And maybe the piece of humility we need is the letting go of what we know for certain a little bit. Right? That might be a place where it's really helpful in our lives. So we are in the story of Jeremiah, and last week we told you about him being called in a time when Israel still had a chance to get their act together. And he's telling them, like, bad stuff's going to happen. It's not that some intervening God is actually going to come in and curse you. It's that the result of how you're living is going to leave you cursed. And then we just jumped ahead 17 chapters and a whole lifetime, and now we're meeting Jeremiah when they didn't listen. And now the people are in exile. And so the question before them is, all right, this is a fine kettle of fish. How are we going to live in exile? And maybe one of the questions before us is, if you, like me, think that there's some parts of the stories we've been steeped in that aren't working and we need new ones, how are we going to live in this time when we don't fully have a new story or we don't believe it yet? How are we going to live our lives? So what Jeremiah did that I think is a really interesting thing, I think Jesus did it too in his parables. He would often pick a metaphor that people would know, and he'd use it. And then he'd kind of keep circling around it and circling around it and looking for some truth in it. And so the metaphor that I want to talk about is, the metaphor he used is about trees, and it's about trees planted by the river where they have a great life, and stunted vegetation planted in the desert. And it's a story about abundance and scarcity. And I want to give you a little real life example about abundance and scarcity to try to expose that when we're presented with how you're going to live your life, it's not so simple as do the right thing and don't do the wrong thing. It's all, yeah, you keep circling around and you're like, actually, are you sure? It's more complicated. So here's my everyday story. I've never used this one in a sermon. It's kind of impressive after nearly 20 years. 25 years. Yeah. So this one is my mother-in-law. She reached that stage in life where she didn't make the turkey dinners anymore, right? That was our generation was doing it, but she was helpful. So she would often end up with the peeling potato job. Great job at it. I miss her for that. And I would look at her pot of potatoes. I love my mother-in-law. We got along really well. She put up with me and didn't tell me how to raise my kids. She was amazing. I would look at her pot of potatoes, and I'd think to myself, like, not enough. You did not do enough. Anyone else, I would have told them, but I didn't tell her. I just looked at it, and I thought, not enough. So we'd sit down to dinner, right? Perfect amount every time. Every time. I, on the other hand, to this day, because I'm now peeling potatoes more than I'd like, I peel the potatoes, I look in the pot, ask everyone else, do you think it's enough? Oh, yeah, it's enough. Peel a couple more, right? 2 people, 4 people, 20 people, doesn't matter, I peel more. Every time without fail, I am throwing potatoes into the compost, right? It's life. And so here's the question. Who was operating from abundance and who from scarcity? Okay, I was operating from scarcity. There's not going to be enough potatoes. But then my response was to give an overabundance. And then the result was we had enough, but we wasted a lot. My mother-in-law, was her orientation abundance, like there's going to be enough? Or was her orientation as one who grew up in the shadow of the Great Depression, there's a limited resource here, and we're going to make sure that it goes around? Like I'm trying to say, like, I don't know, it's complicated. So for the Israelites, there's this metaphor that Jeremiah throws in because they are now living in a place where they're in exile, and they're living from scarcity a lot of the time, saying, actually, we'd rather be back in Egypt where there were 3 square meals a day and everything, you know. And yet there they are in the wilderness, and God provides. So here's what I think is clever about the metaphor he uses. I had to do some research. He says, those who are planted like a tree by a riverside, your roots are going to go deep towards the river, and you're going to thrive. And those of you who are like stunted vegetation in the desert, you're cursed. They're operating from, so this is abundance and scarcity. Okay, but here's what I learned. Or you already know this, right? So stunted vegetation in the desert, it's actually alive, right? It's not dead. You could throw in a Monty Python quote here, but I won't. The stunted vegetation in the desert is not dead yet. The internet tells me all that stunted vegetation means is that it's lost its vigor. Like, huh, yeah. When you live in a place of scarcity, you can lose your vigor, which, let's be honest, you're going through life, you're losing your vigor. Takes a long time to notice that, and frankly, sometimes it feels like, that's good enough, that's life, I'm alive. Trees by the river. Okay, why is the soil by the river so rich? Because the river floods its banks and brings all that nutrient water and silt and stuff. So in the moment when that soil's being replenished by the flooding of the water, the farmer loses their crops. So the metaphor is telling us you live from a place of abundance when you're that tree by the river, and yet there's still moments of destruction. But of course, there's the other piece of your leaves still fall like they will, and then you become part of the food that feeds the fish. And the Bible's going to tell you that it's black and white stories because we hear those well. But the truth of our lives is things are complicated. So let me tell you what I know about scarcity and abundance. Walter Brueggemann says that in biblical times, this whole metaphor, people were living by it. And what he said, which I think is kind of brilliant, is the people who were living from an ideology of scarcity were the rich in the biblical sense. So the rich were living from this ideology of scarcity. There's not enough money, not enough property, not enough power. I'll take it all and hoard it. I'll even take it if others don't get it. He says in biblical times, or at least in the metaphor sort of way, that the people who were living as, I hope the pew hasn't broken underneath you. This will be good when I start saying we need to have chairs in here. Yeah, relocate. At home, it's chaos. Like I said, from the concert last night, we partied too hard. Those who actually are living with the implication of scarcity, right? Those who don't have enough, the poor who are very poor in biblical time, they live from a place of abundance. We are called to live from a place of abundance, a place that says, no matter what it looks like out there, there is enough. There's enough. There's enough for all of us when we share and we take just what we need, and when we keep our eye on others. It sounds pretty simple, right? And I worry about what happens when we go too far into that place of scarcity, which our world is kind of based on. And I don't know, I mean, we learned it early. I learned it when I was about 8. Anyone remember the first iteration of Cabbage Patch Dolls? Yeah, I learned about scarcity. And I honestly, I ended up sending my father instead of my mother to Consumers Distributing because I knew that he would push his way to the front of the line to get the cabbage. It's scarcity. Oh, she had red hair, yeah. Her name was Marcy. Okay. And I hoarded. I had 3. We learn about scarcity. We live it. We breathe it. We don't even know when we're doing it. If we go down that road too far, I think what can tend to happen and what I see happening, and I'm open to conversation here, I think we see a world that is dichotomized, and frankly, the right and the left, neither one is offering us a really good story right now. And we start to look to either blame whoever we can for the scarcity that we see, and some people will blame those who have brown skin, and some will blame those who are immigrants, and some will blame those who have trans bodies. But others of us will blame the people who blame those people for it all. And we need a new story. A story that taps into the story of abundance that Jesus taught us about. And so, how will we live in exile? If we are living in a time where we need some new things to root our lives in, we want to really trust that God we've been taught about here of all love is actually at work in our lives, what are we going to root ourselves in? And there could be a whole lot of answers for that, right? A whole lot of answers. I'm gonna tell you about another metaphor rather than, because the next time I give you a total answer and you're like, yeah, I've got this figured out, don't trust me. So instead, I'm going to give you a metaphor. I'm going to give you a practice to think about in terms of, is this a practice that can open our eyes to the truth that we are surrounded and rooted in abundance? And abundance doesn't mean gluttony. Abundance is like being that tree that lives by the riverside and knows that life includes death, that life is filled with beauty and heartbreak. So I want to talk about communion, which we're not having today, but we will next week. But first, I want to tell you a story about communion in my own life and then our communion. Then I'm almost done. Yesterday morning, I got up at about 5:30. Pretty impressive, right? Yeah, this is because I don't actually trust that the Spirit will be abundant in helping with sermon writing. So the Spirit usually shows up on Saturday morning, or that's when I open up, I guess. So I'm up early. And not long after I'm with my computer doing my thing, it's starting to roll, a cup of coffee is placed beside me. Now, there is nothing extraordinary. I get a cup of coffee placed beside me a good 5 days a week. Yeah. And I say thank you a lot, but it's something, yesterday I just felt it. It was that piece of, wow. And it was both the gift of so thoughtful that you know that this is a kind act, but it was also that awareness in those moments that I don't know if this is an occupational hazard or a human hazard, but I went for a moment to, this story's going to end. There won't always be a coffee brought. This is a moment. And I went back to savor the beauty of it and the gratitude, just holding the truth that all of it dies and turns into some new life. We need to be able to hold that truth. When we look at the Eucharist, communion, we think of that story of Jesus when he sat around the table the night before he was betrayed. And that's a good story. But there's another one that I think might be more helpful to us because that was not the first time he broke bread with people. There's the story of the loaves and the fishes, where he's long day of crowds of people, and he did a few acts that I think we could live from. They were hungry. It was the end of the day. He took what was offered. He took what was available. 2 fish, 5 loaves. He blessed it. He blessed what looked like a scarcity. He broke it. I think that's a key too, right? He broke the bread, yes, to share it and make it go further, but to show that what he had just blessed, what is beautiful in our lives, is also broken. That's part of being alive. Shared it. And then, of course, the story goes at the end, right, there's the mounds and mounds of bread and fish. And I kind of picture that story and think, okay, so people sat there and they saw what was. Some of them thought it wasn't enough. They saw it blessed. They saw that the ordinary stuff of life, bread, the very thing we need to live, might have been rice somewhere else, might have been potatoes if he was here in the Maritimes. It's blessed and it's broken. And then they took it into their very bodies and transformed it back into life. We need to keep looking for those very simple, everyday examples of abundance. And they might start with stories of, or mindsets that say, 2 loaves, 5 fish, not enough. Not enough. And we need to keep with the story. And someone amongst us needs to be the one that dares to stand up every time we gather and bless the mess that we've created or the little we've brought. And we need to take on the work of showing not so much humility, but authenticity of, yeah, our community or our family or this, there's so much that's kind of broken, but we need to break it open and say, here's what's broken in my life. How about yours? Can we learn from one another? And we need to take all of that and make it part of our very being. So when we celebrate communion next week, whether you're at home or here, don't just think we're doing some ritual from a couple thousand years ago. We are trying to remember with the very cells of our body that there is a story of God's abundant love that is at work in our world. And so every Sunday we come into this place, we are entering a different story. We are being held in this story of love at work in the world that is so abundant, so filled, that it will see us through whatever exile we are in. And we're going to keep practicing that story in this place week in and week out, and it will be enough to sustain us. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Beth. Please join me in prayer. Holy One, the root of our joy is gratefulness. It is not joy that makes us grateful. It is gratitude that makes us joyful. We acknowledge that what we most fundamentally and truly are is what our relationship to you makes us. We acknowledge that the most essential value of every person is that by simply existing, we express your joy, your abundance, your love, which initiates all things. In times such as these, it can be difficult to see your goodness and our goodness in the world. Help us to seek out your goodness and accept that we belong to each other. Help us to understand the goodness in the struggle for justice, the goodness in the tenderness of compassion. Help us to understand the goodness in the reality of truth, even when it is difficult or dangerous to speak. Help us to know that there is goodness in this because it is our witness of the abundance of you, of the goodness of life that you give, that will not be obliterated by fear or scarcity. Thank you, Holy One, for this good life, and forgive us if we do not love it enough. Amen.
As Katie extinguishes the candles, we are reminded that that light is present within each and every one of us. You are a beautiful expression of holiness in the flesh, in all your imperfections. You are a gift. And so share that light this day, every moment that you can, with as much as you have to give, and know that the love that birthed the universe, the love that called to Jeremiah in the womb, will not let us go. That love carries you from here into your day. Blessings as you are a blessing. Amen.